Hello and welcome to another episode of the Many Faces of Cancer podcast. I am your host, Melissa Grosboll, and joining me today is Tim McDonald. And Tim is an author, healthcare advocate, speaker, and community builder who turned his stage 4 colorectal cancer diagnosis into a mission for change. He translates patient experience into meaningful action for researchers, policymakers, and healthcare organizations through leadership roles with Fight Colorectal Cancer, Man Up to Cancer, HOPA, and the PAN Foundation. Now host of Advocacy at Work podcast, Tim uses storytelling and advocacy to raise awareness and drive impact. And he is also the author of a brand new book, From Patient to Advocate. So welcome to the show, Tim.
Well, thank you so much, Melissa. I'm so honored to be here. Thank you.
I am so glad to have you on. And we remind everybody that the month of March is Colorectal Cancer Awareness Month. So I'm so excited to have you on, this month to be able to share your story and continue to raise awareness for this very, 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 very fast growing population of cancer.
Yeah, and especially on people under 50, unfortunately. I've been doing this ever since I was diagnosed, and it's getting more frightening every year that we don't have funding for it, to see the amount of people under 50 showing up on the Hill with me each March to ask for funding. It's just incredible.
Yeah. And it's very sad. I mean, many cancers are progressing into younger and younger ages, but I think colorectal cancer is one of the biggest.
I think you're correct there. I just saw some data on that when I was up in DC from the American Cancer Society, and it was absolutely frightening.
And, what is it? I think it's 50 before they start routinely screening with colonoscopies.
Well, the age a few years ago was dropped to 45, which was a major win, policy win for us. However, the rates of people 45 to 50 and even 50 to 54 are way under where they should be. So, trying to get those rates up, but then also make it more accessible and covered for people under the age of 45 is now what we're really hoping to change.
Well, we'll talk about this more, but I see commercials all the time, and I even see it on my social media and stuff for Cologuard, which is the at-home testing. Do you have any, I don't necessarily stats, but is that at least a good starting point for people?
Well, if you are no symptoms and no family history, tests like Cologuard are absolutely amazing because you don't need to go to, get a ride, a colonoscopy if you've ever had one. You need to have a driver there with you. You cannot take Uber. You cannot take public transportation. You need a driver that comes and stays with you and drives you home. So that's a major barrier right there for a lot of people. But then it's also the prep, and that's what you usually see online, your friends sharing. So definitely tests like Cologuard, which is a stool test at home. Your doctor needs to prescribe it, but they just send it to you. You get it. You don't poop actually in the box. You poop in a little collection kit and put it in the box. Unlike what I think a lot of people think.
Like a fire hat, like a fireman's hat.
Yeah. And then you send it back, and then you get the results from your doctor. But there are some exciting tests coming out. In addition to the maker of Cologuard, other companies are coming out with blood-based tests for colorectal cancer too, which is very exciting. And I actually have sat on, as you mentioned, some of the companies I sit on, some steering committees for that. Those are talking about those products that were in clinical trials or still are in clinical trials, and some are now approved by the FDA. So there are more and more options coming out for screening that are what we call non-invasive, like a colonoscopy, that make it a lot easier. And the intention and hope is that those tests will help increase the screening rates. So Cologuard, when that came out, was definitely a boost in the amount of people getting screened because it did not require a colonoscopy to at least get screened if you were at average risk or didn't have any symptoms. And so these blood tests will be the same way. Obviously, if you do have a family history or have symptoms, you will go straight to the colonoscopy. Because typically what happens if you test positive on the Cologuard or one of these blood tests, they send you to get a colonoscopy. So these are kind of like the first line barriers where the colonoscopy is still considered the golden standard for screening colorectal cancer.
I mean, it's kind of like for breast cancer, it's like doing a self-exam versus going and having a mammogram or a biopsy. Like, you know, you got to start somewhere, but there's always more testing to be done.
Absolutely, yes.
And now will doctors prescribe Cologuard for younger people, or is it still 45?
I don't think it's a matter of the doctors prescribing it. Although that is still a big issue, is a lot of doctors do not take younger patients seriously about their conditions. They misdiagnose them with IBS or hemorrhoids or something else because they don't think that younger people can be diagnosed with colorectal. Now, that is changing over the years. Unfortunately, proof changes doctors' minds, and we're seeing more and more younger people diagnosed. So more and more doctors are taking younger patients seriously. But the real issue is the cost.
Because will insurance not pay for it if you're younger?
They probably will not pay for it if you're younger. So in that sense, it becomes an issue. So we have it's a kind of a two-faced approach. One is the doctors not taking younger patients seriously or misdiagnosing them. And then the second issue is the cost for the patients and I don't think anybody facing a chronic disease should have to deal with having to face insurance, or figuring out how to pay for stuff. It's just, I was just talking with our, advocacy director at Pan Foundation this morning via email, and she was sending over a few articles to us, and we got back and forth on a few things. But, it's just so sad in our country that, healthcare costs are so expensive. And in the last 5 years, the increase in costs that we've seen has been absolutely ridiculous. So, I mean, I'm sorry, I'm taking this on a whole nother tangent, but
that's
something I'm pretty passionate
for
about.
A whole other podcast. Absolutely. Yes. And we have no answers on how to change that either. We can just bitch about it and say how terrible it is, but unfortunately there's not a whole lot of change that we can do right now.
Well, actually, that's why I told people all the time when I was up in DC that just a week and a half ago, I said, they're like, asked me the question, why is it the younger people are getting, diagnosed at an earlier age? And I said, I don't know. That's why we need the research funding to figure it out. Because you can't, otherwise you're just throwing, proverbial shit at a wall and seeing what sticks. And I talk a lot like that because of the colorectal cancer world that I come from, so it's always like pun intended. The reality is that, until we have scientific data to actually show us why this is happening, we don't know what problem we're addressing.
Right. Yeah. Okay, so let's go back to your own personal story. Take us through kind of what was going on in your life when you were diagnosed and a little bit just kind of that initial diagnosis story.
Yeah, well, it was, I think this is why I like when I got diagnosed. I mean, not that I like that I got diagnosed, but why I like the time frame I got diagnosed was in late 2020, because all of us have a frame of reference of what 2020 was like. I did.
Yes, and this month is kind of the when it all started, unfortunately. Yes.
Yeah. So my wife and I were just making the best of isolating and staying at home and, having our fun time of, figuring out how to do the things we enjoyed pre-COVID, only doing them in the COVID era, so instead of going to our local sushi restaurant, listening to our musician, We'd get carry out from our local sushi restaurant. Our friends would get carry out from the local sushi restaurant. We'd both be at our homes. We'd hire the musician that played at the sushi restaurant to get on Zoom with us, and we'd have like a little dinner party like we were out at the sushi restaurant, only at home. That's
Oh
just
my
to give
gosh,
you an
that's
idea,
so
kind of
fun.
what we did, you know. So my wife and I were really good at, like, we were not depressed by it. We actually made the best of it, and we were having a really good time. You know, I mean, all things considered. And then around Thanksgiving time, well, it was a little bit before that, I started just having some weird symptoms like never experienced before. Like, and I'll just give them to you because I think it's important for people to understand what some of these are. But
Of
like,
course.
I was having these weird back pains, not like in my shoulders, not like in my lower back, but it was kind of like in my mid back, which was really weird for me. And it wasn't like a pain, like I felt like I pulled something. It wasn't anything that I felt before. I also just occasionally, like, and I don't know, I remember this just because I always had these classes on Tuesday nights, but it seemed like every Tuesday night I'd start feeling sick. I wouldn't feel good, like just kind of, you know, fatigued, lethargic, a little bit of a headache, you know, just kind of not feeling well. And then I remember, now I live in Florida, so, you know, we have air conditioning almost all year round. But I was at our daughter's house. She always kept it a little bit cooler than we did at our house, and so we spent a lot of time because our granddaughter was very young and we were helping out. And I would always have to go outside because I was so cold, and I'd have to go outside. But then I started having sweats at night, night sweats, and I'm like, something is not right here, you know, but I didn't really have insurance. So I was just like, let me try and get some catastrophic insurance. Try and make this as short as I can now. But then it really happened on Thanksgiving. I felt it was just my wife and I were having a little Thanksgiving dinner, and I just did not feel good at all. I had this really bad pain in my lower right side, and I was just like, man, I think you know, something's not right. And we didn't tie all this together at the time. It was just like, you know, each one of these things was kind of isolated, but I share them all because I think they're all symptoms of what having cancer is. So
And not
I
your typical symptoms
no,
either. The
no,
back pain, you know, the night sweats, those aren't your typical symptoms.
yeah. Well, and if I talk to any woman, it's like going through, you know, menopause, right?
Menopause, right? That was my thought.
So, you know, so I just, she told me to go to the urgent care, and you know, me being a guy, I'm just like, I'll just see if it goes away. Well, Sunday morning she woke up, and back then you needed to make appointments to go to the urgent care. So she got up. I told her I made an appointment. She goes, I thought you weren't going to wait until Monday. And I said, it's gotten too bad. I just need to go. So I went in. They didn't know what it was, thought it might have been like a kidney stone or something, but just wasn't sure, just because of the pain that I was experiencing and some of the other feelings that I had said. But they ordered a CT scan to find out what it was. And I ordered that on Monday. I went in. They told me, do not call us for your results. Your provider will call you with, you know, with the results. It'll probably be in a few hours. They'll get the results. So you should hear something this afternoon. And I got there and I knew something was up because, you know, any doctor's visit you go into, you always got to give them your name, fill out the registration forms, take a seat. They call you back. Well, I walked in and they're like, Mr. McDonald. And I said, yes. And they're like, come on back. And that's when I knew something was different, you know, something was going on. And I went right into the room, and 2 seconds later, and you know, this never happens either, the doctor comes in, and he's got one piece of paper in his hand. And the first words out of his mouth were, you have cancer. And I just was like, okay, well, what does that mean? And he was like, well, it's in your colon and it looks like you got spots all over your liver. Um, And I'm like, so what do I need to do next? And I was just so matter of fact about it, just like we're talking about it. He thought something was wrong with me. And he kept asking, like, do you want me to call your wife? Do you need somebody to come get you? And I'm like, why are you asking me these questions? And he goes, because you're not reacting like a normal person would. And I'm like, well, let me ask you a question. And he said, what? And I said, if I was to act any differently, would it change what you just told me? And he said, no. And I said, well, then why should I act differently? This is just a piece of news, just like we get news every day. It might not be the news I wanted, and it's certainly not great news, but it's just news. I got to deal with it just like I deal with everything else. That's kind of what my thought process is. I was definitely one of these people who was into, meditation and breathing and mindfulness and consciousness. So I understood the fact that like it's not what happens to us, it's our reaction to everything that we control. And so this was just another instance where it wasn't like I could not control what was happening to me. I could only control my reaction to it. That's how I was processing this. But long story short, he got me into a GI surgeon who he worked with in the ER. Again, we're during COVID. So my colonoscopy was scheduled 3 days later, which was about as quick as you could do it in those days. They put a stent in my colon. The GI surgeon had told me that my colon was almost completely blocked off. And he mentioned to my wife when she was out in the waiting room that if I would have let it go a few more weeks, my colon probably would have ruptured and I probably could have died. That's how closed off it was. And
the universe works in mysterious ways.
If you don't take yourself in, your body will tell you it's time.
Absolutely. And hopefully it's in time.
But then I got a stent put in, and then I got into an oncologist like a week later, which I thought was forever during that time. But now that I hear so many other stories, I'm like, that was from me getting diagnosed to getting my colonoscopy to getting in to see an oncologist and getting my first infusion was literally a week and a half.
Wow. That's insane.
And
comparatively for most people.
I know, because I hear people that wait like 3 months to get in to see an oncologist.
It's like a week and a half to even get an appointment.
Right. So I was very fortunate that everything aligned. But after that first infusion, about a week later, I was sitting on the toilet, and I don't want to get too gross here, but let's just say the stent was in my colon, and the stent is like a little mesh tube that they put in to open up your colon so that your stool can pass through. Well, I was sitting on the toilet, and my wife was doing some work out in the garage, and I said, I got to go to the bathroom, and she comes in like 40 minutes later and says, are you okay? And I'm like, yeah, I just can't finish. I'm like, there's something coming out that is like not coming, I'm like, I don't understand.
Gosh, was the stent coming out?
I finally thought it was just a piece of stool, and I took a big wad of toilet paper and I yanked it out, and I felt this relief, and I looked at it and I'm like, you got to remember, it's not like a wire mesh thing at this point. It's covered in stool. Right. So I'm like, what is it? And then I'm like, oh, this is the stent. And so I called my oncologist, and I'm like, is this okay? And he goes, it's very encouraging. Those were his words. Because typically that will only happen if your tumor shrunk enough for it to be able to pass.
Nice. Okay.
So all this stuff about scanxiety that people have, I almost knew going in. It was kind of like when you're in school and you get the answer key before the test and you're going to ace the test. It's kind of like I knew I was going to get good results on my first CT scan in 3 months after about 2 weeks after my diagnosis now, nice. Or 3 weeks after my diagnosis. So I was like, never experienced anxiety. I just went in and said, oh, I know I'm going to have a good result, and that first scan after 3 months was, I had centimeter size, like, 6-7 centimeter tumors on my liver. And they had reduced by like 2 or 3 centimeters, which was
fantastic.
Huge, significant reduction.
Yes.
And then I just, I was on a really aggressive chemo. I got into our cancer center after that first oncologist. And I will just throw this in there. He referred me to another oncologist just because it was closer to my house. And she told me I had 3 years to live and was going to make my life as comfortable as possible. and that I actually fired her after that first visit, um,
Good.
because that wasn't my story, that was her story.
Right.
And and why I throw that in there is because I really want to stress the importance of not being stuck with one doctor. You have a choice, and you can get second and third and fourth and 10th opinions. And if your doctor isn't good with that, you don't want that doctor anyway. So that's why I brought that up. But I got into Moffitt. They put me on a really aggressive chemo for 6 months. And in that 6 months, it was doing the job on the cancer, but it was also doing the job on my body. Um, and I started getting involved in some support groups for colorectal cancer patients, and Colontown was one of them that I was in. That's it's their tagline is kind of where hope meets science. So they don't talk about like the miracle cures or alternative methods, unless if there's some scientific backing to them, and it's all patient and caregiver run. So you're getting actual information from actual patients who have been through things, and
Yes.
and they have a whole bunch of different neighborhoods for. And I won't get too far in depth on all this, but I just want to give the context here so you understand when I say it what it is. But all these different neighborhoods, based upon what stage you are, where your metastasis is, where you're located, your interest, all this stuff. So I was in this one for Liver Lovers Lane, is what they call it, and it was for people with liver metastasis. And they had this thing in February. Now, I was diagnosed in November. They were doing this in February, so it was 3 months after, and they had all the different type of treatments for the different conditions on your liver. So it was like, if you only have one or two spots, maybe this will work. If you have, a hard to reach spot, maybe this will work. If you have this, maybe this will work. And I'm like, I'm going, and this is all new to me at the time. So I'm going through each one, and I'm like, finally, something's like putting it in language that I can understand, and I'm like going through it, and I'm like, no, no, no. And they had like 12 different ones. And I get to the last one, and it's a liver transplant. And I'm like, wait, you can have as many tumors as you want on your liver. It just has to be confined to your liver. I'm like, maybe I'm a candidate for this. And so for the first time in my whole journey at that point, I had finally thought, like, maybe there was something that could help me get off of chemo, because everybody else had told me chemo for life. I wasn't a surgical candidate, no, not everybody was telling me I had 3 years to live. A lot of, I talked to my original oncologist, and he was like, Tim, 3 to 5 years is the average, but that takes into account all ages, all health conditions. You're in your early 50s, you're overall healthy outside of the cancer. Do I think you're going to live to 10 years? Not realistically. Do I think you're only going to live 3 years? No, I think you're going to live longer. But can I tell you how long you're going to live? No. So that was kind of the mindset that I had going in, is
And
like,
that's a good doctor who won't say, this
well,
is what you've got. Because so
that's
many times you hear that, and then that's when you're dead. Like, people just kind of give up
yeah.
and say, well, this is what the time
Well,
that I have
and that's
left.
why he said early in his career, he would tell people, and he'd tell people 3 months and they live for 3 years. He'd tell people 3 years and they live for 3 months. So he learned not to tell people that long. But so I'm like, I'm just trying to like figure out something that would get the cancer out of me. And liver transplant seemed to be it. So after a couple months, I started pursuing that option. And in June, I finally got in touch with a surgeon who was doing liver transplants for metastasized colorectal cancer patients up in Rochester, New York. And I set up a Zoom meeting for him in late July. And at that point, I wasn't a candidate because you need to be in treatment for a year and respond favorably. Um, so that was like one. I mean, a lot of other treatments for colorectal cancer are like you can do pretty quickly, right? And liver transplant is something where they want to make sure, because it was pretty new at the time. There was only 14 centers in North America doing it. Um, 12 of them did live donors and 2 of them did deceased donors. That whole picture has changed dramatically over the last 5 years. A lot more places are doing them. There's a lot more deceased donors because technology has evolved and changed. But they still do more than anybody else. And so I ended up getting, The next thing I needed to do was connect my surgeon with my oncologist, surgeon in New York, oncologist in Tampa, try and get them to both communicate with each other. That took about 2 months to happen, but once they actually physically talked with each other, everything after that was, now I just go in and can ask for anything that my transplant team tells me, and my local oncologist will do it.
Nice.
Before that, it was like, why are they asking that? Why? I don't see why that would help, And I'm like, will you please just call them and talk to them? And after that, it got taken care of. And then I ended up, so I got a colon resection to remove my primary. When we learned that, it was gone. It was all just scar tissue. So then I started searching for a donor. It took 14 months to find a donor. I was one of the longer people. Typically, it takes 7 months. And I was actually the first person to ever receive a metastasized colorectal cancer patient to receive a altruistic donor, not a directed donor. Because most people, when they're finding a living donor, you are responsible for finding your own donor. There's no database.
Or you have a champion that goes out
or a champion, but it's basically the patient's responsibility to find their donor. So whether you get somebody to help you do that or you do it yourself, you have to find it. And I just realized during this whole search that I was looking for that I started connecting with other colorectal cancer patients that were searching for donors and started trying to help people because my thought process was, well, if there's an average of 7 people that you need to get screened before you find your match, some of those people really would donate to anybody else, not just the person that they were calling for. And so how can I try and make that happen where some of these people who are willing to donate that aren't a match for that person might be a match for somebody else? And so I started up Share My Liver, which was just to try and help people, connect people with potential donors that were searching for donors. And so that was just part of it. And then I ended up getting my donor after 14 months. I was kind of losing hope that I was going to get a transplant and a donor. And in March of 23, I ended up getting a liver transplant. So, and actually when they took my liver out, they had found that I had a complete response to the chemo. All the tumors that were showing up on my liver were scar tissue. There was no active cancer cells, but my liver was completely destroyed by the chemo that I had had for 2.5 years. So it was a lot of people hear that and they're like, oh, so you didn't even need the liver transplant. And I'm like, oh no. Well, we wouldn't have ever known that those spots on my liver were scar tissue.
Unless they had taken it out.
They took it out. Right. And B, my liver was so damaged by the chemo that I probably wouldn't have lived too much longer because I would have gone into liver failure. So it was definitely worth getting the transplant.
Holy cow.
So, but yeah, that's kind of my journey and what I've, went through with my cancer. And, I really feel like, everything in life happens for a reason. And about, in that first week when I was trying to figure out like who I needed to see and what treatment path I was going down, I was thinking that thought about what does this mean for me? What lesson am I supposed to take from this? And the one thing that just came to my mind was I'm pretty connected with a lot of different people online is I just need to start spreading awareness so that other people that I know don't have to go through the same thing that I'm about to go through. And I didn't realize that was advocacy at the time, but that's what I started doing was advocating. And over the course of my treatment, as I started helping other patients, pursue a liver transplant, find donors, I also started getting involved in doing some research studies with, I remember I was I think one of the first ones I did was with a radiologist association. I talked with the National Health Institute about the dietitian and how important diet is to cancer patients. I was on a virtual panel for them. I've done a lot of that type of work. And then I started dipping my toes into going to Washington and calling on Congress getting directed funding that we were talking about earlier, which I just did a week ago. And then I started getting into doing more research advocacy, like understanding the power the patient has when we're talking with pharmaceutical companies, medical supply companies, you know, organizations, talking with those researchers and helping them understand what this means for us as patients is critical in them developing products and treatments that are actually going to be beneficial to us, not just making us better, but also lessening the side effects, making the burden, like we were talking about on colonoscopies, needing to drive there, needing to get somebody to watch your kids, all these things that are barriers for people going, making that, like, removing those barriers, make sure they understand those, because when you're sitting in a lab, you don't see those things all the time.
Right.
You don't think of those things because that's not what you're trained to do. You're
Well,
trained
and
to
it's
think
not your
about
reality.
it's
You're
not your
just sitting in a
reality,
lab. You
right?
haven't had to worry about going for a colonoscopy and getting
Yeah.
care for your kids, right?
So research advocacy came very close to my heart, and so now I really focus on doing a lot of research advocacy, a lot of legislative advocacy, and it's just been. I mean, I really feel like, in a way, being diagnosed was almost a gift because of the people that it connected me with, and because of this newfound purpose that I have in life. That's very meaningful, and it just means the world to me with the people that I've been connected with because of this disease. And I
You
know
know,
I know it's so hard to say that cancer is a gift, but I really
no,
think it is.
I mean, honestly, so many people that I talk to on this podcast, and that's kind of the meaning behind this podcast, is maybe not necessarily a gift or a blessing, but at least there are silver linings. And so many people, myself included, the community that rallies around us, and that has been probably my biggest gift as well, is just the people that I know now, the friends that I have made, the community that I have built because of this one shared experience. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I love to hear that from other people. I mean, we don't want to get cancer. We would never wish it. And so many amazing things come from going through this experience. So absolutely. Yes.
Yeah.
So let's switch gears a little bit. So all of this, you really got into advocacy, the organizations that you work with now, as well as, I mean, you have a podcast and a brand new book. So can you talk a little bit about both of those?
Yeah. Well, after my transplant, I was working for a tech startup, and we ran out of funding. And so I wasn't supposed to work for 6 months after my transplant anyway. And so I just kind of took the time to start looking for another job. Well, that 6 month period turned into 2 years, and I didn't find anything yet. So I was at this little networking event, and somebody said, if you could do anything, what would it be? And, like, your dream job. And I said, I'd love to either be a full-time advocate or work with an organization on their advocacy program. And that person said, have you ever thought of starting a podcast? And I said, well, I've done podcasts for 15 years now. I'm like, yeah, I could do that easily. And he goes, well, what you'll do is you'll start getting connected to some of these organizations. Eventually, what'll happen is somebody's going to have a need. They're going to think of you as a thought leader in that, and they'll ask you if you want to work for them. And
There
I'm
you
like,
go.
great. So I got home, I bought the domain, I started recording podcast episodes, and then I got hired for a job, my traditional job. And I got so immersed in that I never ended up publishing any of these episodes that I'd recorded. And so once I kind of got my grounded in my job and understood, what I was doing, and it wasn't as overwhelming, I'm like, I started having a little bit more time, and I'm like, oh man, I got this podcast ready to go. I should start publishing them. So I did. And I started getting more people as guests. I started recording new episodes, and I started writing blog posts. And then all of a sudden I would go to an event and somebody would say, how do you get to do all this stuff? how do you get to go to these events? How do you get asked to be on these research panels? How do you get involved in this stuff? And I said, you know, it's not as simple. I should preface this. I'm a big believer for years that if somebody asks you something 3 times, you should write a blog post about it, because then you just share a link instead of having to explain yours. It's a time saver, right? Is what it
You're
is.
not answering the same question a
Yeah.
hundred times.
And
Here,
so
go read my blog. There's your answer.
and I'm like, well, I should write a blog. And I'm like, are you nuts? This is not a blog post. This is a story, right? And then I'm like, oh, wait. For the last 10 years, people have been telling me I need to write a book. I'm like, this is the book. And so that's how the book idea started, was just from patients asking me how I got involved in doing the advocacy work, and me understanding that this wasn't a simple blog post. If I wanted to be real about it, it was a book. And so I started writing the book, and it released on March 1st. And I couldn't be happier about that. I couldn't be happier about the podcast. And I'm really happy doing my job too. And I have a company that supports my advocacy work, and we have an unlimited time off policy. That doesn't mean I can do whatever I want when I want, but for the most part, they're very understanding and supportive and flexible with the time that I ask for to do the advocacy work that I do.
Which, I mean, you can't ask for anything more than that, right?
No, everything. I wouldn't change a thing right now. You read my bio. I start, people ask me, I start listing off all the things, and it boggles my mind as I start listing them off that I do all this, but in all honesty, it doesn't feel like work to me.
Well, when it's your passion, it shouldn't.
Right. And so this is like, I do a lot and it takes up a lot of my day, but it's fulfilling. It's uplifting. It energizes me. It doesn't drain me. And so it drains me reading all the stuff I do, but it doesn't drain. It actually fuels me to actually do it.
All right. So what's the name of the book and where can people get it?
So it's From Patient to Advocate, Turning Survivorship into Impact. And it's on Amazon. Okay. So if you just type that in, you will definitely find it. It's the only book with that title.
And we'll put the link in the show notes too, so people can just go there as well.
So that's where you can get the book.
All right. So Tim, where can people find you? Other than your book, people want to reach out to you if they want more information about all the things you're doing. What's the best way for people to contact you?
Yeah, well, I always say, LinkedIn is probably my best way because it's where I share most of the advocacy stuff. And then I also have a website, which is where I host my blog and my podcast, which is just advocacyatwork.com. Okay. And then I think I gave you links to my Instagram and Facebook handles too. Both of those are great, but I do, you'll get some personal stuff mixed in with my advocacy stuff too.
That's okay. We like to know the human behind the advocate.
Oh, well, and I always try and keep my advocacy work very personal. I don't, I know a lot of people say I'm always smiling, I'm always uplifting. And I try and be that way because I'm more of a glass half full kind of person than a glass half empty. But I also, in all my stories that I share and in the book, I don't ever try and gloss over the downside of what these chronic diseases cause, the pain that we experience from the loss of people that we become close to in this journey. Those are all real things. And I don't think it's fair if I only talk about the good things that come out of this. So I am very real with my writing, whether it's on LinkedIn or on the podcast or on any of my other channels. You will get both sides from me. You just won't get the side saying, hey, come over and be an advocate, because I am very much aware that this is not for everybody.
I mean, some people don't ever want to talk about it at all. And I mean, everybody's got their own journey. Not everybody can see the blessings or the gifts. Some people just are trying to get through the next 24 hours, so I always like to acknowledge people just going about their day and just living as much as they can, because it's not easy for many, many people.
That is so true. And just because we feel a certain way doesn't mean somebody else needs to feel that way. They have their
Absolutely.
own way of feeling, and we should respect that and support that.
Right. Yeah. And I interviewed a woman and we talked a lot about, I guess, the term toxic positivity and, being glass half full is different from being toxically positive and just making, trying to make everybody else happy and positive about their experience when for so many people it's not. So there is definitely a difference. You can be a glass half full kind of person for yourself and for others and not expecting everybody else to be that way too.
Yeah. I remember a guy that I met locally here. He was the first guy from my men's cancer group. We both got infusions in the same place. So even though it was COVID, we were able to see each other in the infusion center several times. I was on his podcast. I got to know him pretty well at some meetups that we had and everything. And we have a saying in our men's cancer group, which is KFG, which is keep effing going, right? And I know he was like a 12-year survivor, and he ended up taking a turn and got to a point where he decided he was no longer going to do any treatment and go into hospice. And I remember posting something about when he announced that in our group that I just said KFG. And I wasn't the only one. I mean, there was other guys. And he goes, listen, my time is over. There is no KFG for me. Don't tell me to KFG. I just need your support in my decision. And that to me taught me a lesson about how we talk to other patients. We need to understand that it's not our perspective that matters. It's their perspective that matters.
And I mean, that was his advocacy too. That was him advocating for himself and
Yeah.
knowing what he needed and what he wanted. And I love that your group really in many ways allowed him to be able to say that, and hopefully everybody else acknowledged that and went along with that.
Yeah. I mean, he handled the end of his life with the grace that I can only hope that I experience as I face the end of my life. Let's put it that way. I mean, I'm tearing up because he was so close to me. And I mean, not like a close friend, but just close as far as our connection through the cancer group and being local here. And he taught me, I mean, he gave me so much good advice when I was first diagnosed because he had so many years more experience than me. And, but he really, really just went through his whole treatment all the way through till the end of his life with such grace that I admire it.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. No, I mean, that is the reality of the cancer space, unfortunately, until a lot of things change. And we just need to acknowledge it and appreciate those warriors and pray that other people don't have to go through that and that we can hopefully make some kind of change.
Well, I was going to say, I was just talking with a couple of people up in DC, and, a few of them were really struggling with the losses that they've experienced. And I mean, I spent a year struggling with it not too long ago. And, I told them, I said, I know this is going to sound a lot easier than it is to do, but I've learned how to take that grief off of my shoulders and light my flame with it even brighter.
Oh,
And
that's beautiful.
it never forgets who they are. It's right out in front of you, lighting your path forward, and you're bringing them with you. But you don't need to carry them on your back because that weighs you down, that drags you down. It doesn't allow you to move forward.
And they wouldn't want that either.
And they wouldn't want that. They want us to move forward. They want us not to forget about them, but to make change on their behalf. And so, I mean, I know it's a lot easier said than done, but it took me talking to a therapist. It taught me talking with other guys in my men's cancer group. It taught me, because our men's cancer group is a place for men to open up and be vulnerable like that we can't usually share publicly on other platforms or with other women, because it doesn't resonate. We have different ways of talking and different feelings. And, so it just, I just want people to know that I know it sounds easy, but it's really hard work.
All right. Well, that seems to be a little bit more uplifting place to stop for today. So thank you so much for this conversation, Tim. This is such an important conversation, especially with this month being Colorectal Cancer Awareness Month. And just, I honestly, I love talking to men because so many men won't share. So many men feel like they have to be strong and they have to be providers and just take it on the chin and keep going. And part of this podcast and these conversations is really letting men know that it is okay to share. It's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to be advocates. So I really appreciate your honesty and your vulnerability today, because that's what's going to change people's hearts.
Yeah, I just posted the other day about my men's cancer group, Man Up to Cancer. I said, we were brought up to think that crying was a weakness, that saying I love you to other men was a weakness. And I've learned that both of those things are strengths. Because if I can do it when society's telling me I shouldn't, that's more strength than doing what everybody else is doing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you so much for your time today.
I really appreciate it, Melissa.
All right. Have a great rest of your day and go from patient to advocate. We gotcha. All right. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.